evidence suggests that people were tracking time way before we originally thought. We need to go back to the beginning. We need to set a foundation and start at the beginning. Well, that's not necessarily the biblical beginning, as some scholars might want you to think. Let's start instead at the beginning of the earth, or the beginning of the universe and man. Well, first of all, the earth is 4.543 billion years old. So, wow, that's a long time ago. Rocks returned from the moon have been dated at 4.51 billion years old. Martian meteorites that have landed on the earth have also been dated around 4.5 billion years old. This is done by lead dating. Now, this dating has an error range of 50 million years, but hey, what's 50 million years one way or the other, right? Well, let's put this into perspective with the human time frame. Our lifetimes, as we know them, are approximately 100 years, give or take 20. According to science, the chimpanzee-human divergence took place around 10 to 7 million years ago. Since then, 1.5 million years ago, they went extinct. Fossil evidence shows the human of genus Homo, which was an ancestor to our ancestors, basically not related to us, but they came down looking like us. Okay, 300,000 years ago, we know through science that hominins were well on their way to looking like people. About 11,500 years ago, according to science, anatomically correct Homo sapiens were forming subpopulations. Now then, archaeological evidence might give us a clue to man's origins. Those things that meant something to them, their religion, their family, their way of life. Any Bible believer in the English language will tell you, in the beginning, God created the world, and go on to tell you how everything was created in 6 days and God rested on the seventh day. While this is not necessarily wrong, there's a bit more to the story than that. I want to introduce you to some archaeological evidence that we have dating back to 11,500 years. Adam's calendar in Mpumalanga, South Africa. Why is this important? Because they were tracking time 11,500 years ago. The site's called Adam's calendar because the stones are placed to track the movement of the sun, which casts shadows on the rock. It still works perfectly as a calendar today by following the shadow of the setting sun, which is cast by a taller central monolith onto the flat stone beside it. This remarkable calendar was originally a large circular stone structure resembling Stonehenge, and in the center of the circle are two upright stones which are said to have been carved. Its original shape is still clearly visible from satellite images. These stones are dormalite, weighing up to 5 tons each, and are said to have been transported from a distant site. It should be noted that the area surrounding Adam's calendar is rich in gold. That's going to come in important later as we study some of these things more in depth. Several mining shafts have been reported in the area, and one of the richest mines in the area is still active today, Sheba Gold Mine, located in Mpumalanga, South Africa. Not only did these rich gold reefs attract attention in the 1880s, but the early evidence of historic civilizations mining for minerals were described by writings in early Europeans and even earlier than that. And we'll look at some of those earlier writings. In 2004, in Aberdeenshire, Scotland, 12 pits were excavated. In the last 6 months, they've been analyzed by a team of specialists led by Professor Vincent Gaffney of the University of Birmingham. Their research demonstrates that Stone Age society 10,000 years ago was much more sophisticated than we had previously suspected. The evidence suggests that hunter gatherers in Scotland had both the need and sophistication to track time across the years to correct for seasonal drift of the lunar year that has occurred nearly 5,000 years before the first formal calendars were known in the Near East. In doing so, this illustrates one important step towards the formal construction of time and therefore history itself. Okay, so look at it this way. The Ice Age began 2.4 million years ago and lasted until 11,500 years ago, precisely when the first calendar was created. During this time, the Earth's climate repeatedly changed, became very cold and very warm. Homo sapiens have left Africa and come to all corners of the globe. And there's proof, the whole out of Africa thing. So we have the Neanderthals, and then the Neolithic starts 10,000 to 3,000 years ago, or BC rather, so roughly 5,000 to 10,000 years ago. The first permanent settlements, farming began, civilizations developed in Sumer and in Egypt. Invention of the wheel plow, sail, the first evidence of writing, and history begins. So, looking at it from that perspective, the calendar itself was very important. It becomes more important later on. The Sumerian calendar is a star map or planisphere recovered from a library of Ashurbanipal in Nineveh, Iraq, in the late 19th century. Long thought to be an Assyrian tablet, computer analysis has matched it with the sky above Mesopotamia in 3300 BC and proves it to be much more ancient Sumerian origin. The tablet's called an astrolabe, and it's basically the earliest known astronomical instrument. Now, we think this is the beginning of astrology. Okay, so we're going to take a look at that more, astrology more, in a future course. But for now, suffice it to say that they recovered a lot of literary texts on clay tablets from this library. And these writings date to the 3rd millennium BC. So that's 3,300 years before Christ. All right, so there's plenty of evidence that they used a calendar. The Mayan calendar, which actually is a set of 3 interlocking calendars that the Mayans also wanted to track time, seasons, and astronomy. They had their own brand of astrology. But what's interesting about the Mayan calendar is that their long cycle or long count calendar was 5,126 years long and ended the 21st of December 2012, which is the winter solstice. Now, seasons have a major impact on our studies, and we'll get into that later on. Every Greek polis, as well as other states about the Mediterranean, Babylon, and Egypt, all use their own unique calendars independently from each other. All these calendars use lunar cycles and or solar events to track typically solstices and equinoxes, but also certain stars or constellation, and to affix these dates. These calendars ran roughly from midsummer to midsummer, while days ran from sunrise to sunrise. My last point. All the civilizations and early cultures used the calendar to tell them of holy days, religious and secular, and to know when their feast days were. They looked upon nature as being holy and having power, and they celebrated the changing of the seasons and the moon's phases.